Sockled here, helping you make every class Catholic. Lots of schools do great work with the virtues. Schools have virtues of the month. They talk about virtues. They talk about virtuous relationships. They introduce that language with the littles. You know, I've heard great stories of kids saying like, oh, I could have had a little more of the virtue of discretion. You know, like this social situation got out of hand because I didn't have the virtue of discretion. I thought, you know what? If a kid can say that, then they can think it, right? And it's like giving people we know this about feelings, right? If you give people vocabulary about their feelings, they're better able to make good decisions around it, right? Our language helps us to appreciate what's going on. So giving kids the language about virtues actually helps them to be more virtuous, right? So schools are doing great things around virtues, but I've noticed a pattern when I go work in places that have done a lot of work on the virtues. We talk about making every class Catholic. They will often like skip the curricular content and just go straight to talking about virtues. So instead of like, what does this have to do with art or math or whatever? They'll say, well, we just talk about like being good with each other and we do it according to these virtues, right? And like on the one hand, that's good. I'm grateful that you're doing that work. And on the other hand, I want to help you make that so that it integrates all the way down into the curriculum and is not only about what's happening in between learning, right? So, but before I share a couple thoughts on that, just want to let you know about the new Making Every Class Catholic newsletter over on Substack, where I'm going to be sharing ideas, lesson plan prompts, resources, quotes, all kinds of stuff over there. And so follow the link in the description and go subscribe to that free monthly newsletter. While you're at it, why not subscribe here to the YouTube channel if you're not already subscribed, and make sure you like the video and teach that algorithm that it should show this to more people and help more teachers make every class Catholic. So the temptation is focus on virtue because that's Catholic, right? Virtue is Catholic. And then we kind of skip over the question of curricular content. But there are lots of ways that we can take the questions around virtue and make connections with the curriculum. So, for example, I was talking with a group that had all these ideas about virtue, and they were the science table, right? I'd come up to the science table, and I said, okay, so what, like, it's great. Let's have good relationships with our students and with our friends and become more virtuous people by all means. What does virtue have to do with science, right? Now, one obvious way to answer this is like, well, if we have certain kinds of scientific knowledge, they could be used for good or ill. And so you want virtuous people in charge of the decisions about how you use scientific knowledge, right? Just think of nuclear energy, right? That can be used very destructively or very productively, depending how, right? So that's one stage. But here's another level. And I think this would be a really valuable conversation to have in like middle school, early high school science class. What kind of virtues does it take to do science, right? To do science, you need patience and you need humility, right? Because you're going to make a hypothesis and you can't be attached to that. You have to let the evidence of the experiment tell you whether the hypothesis was good or bad, right? So you need virtues like patience and humility. You need perseverance. Like the great breakthroughs in science come from people, right? Well, this is engineering, but it's related to science, right? Think about Thomas Edison and his light bulb, right? You need a lot of perseverance. Now you can expand this list. That's just a tiny sample, right? But you can expand this to other things. One place where it comes up most naturally is often in phys ed and sports, right? What kind of virtues do you need to be good? You need diligence, right? To show up for practice all the time and that good work ethic. You want to be magnanimous, right? This is a great virtue. Magnanimous means greatness of soul. It's the kind of virtue that we see in people who are good winners, right? A magnanimous person is a good winner. Right? Or what kind of virtues do you need to be a good loser, right? You could think about those kinds of things. Here's another one that I think is interesting. Business. Now, often it's the values questions show up in business because we think of like shady business dealings and we want to be upright business people. And that's all legit too, right? One of the things that happens in business is, and this, by the way, this is similar to sports, I think. Both sports and business put you in intense situations and you find out who you are in an intense situation, right? So when you have the opportunity to cheat, right? Because it's on the line. And again, business or sports, it's on the line and the temptation to cheat comes because this is really important, right? That's when you find out who you are. When you have the opportunity to cheat, especially if you have good reason to believe you might not get caught, you have the opportunity to cheat when things are really on the line. That's where you find out the kind of person you are. And I think one of the things that can happen in business, people who go on and start businesses, right? Think of like young entrepreneurs, people who start businesses in their like late teens or early 20s. They can become like miserable people, right? They can become people who like take whatever they can get and will cheat their neighbor out of whatever, right? Now, usually that comes back to bite you. And I think what's actually more likely, at least in my experience, even though I think business sometimes gets a bad rap because there are sleazy business people, I think it's more common that business actually forges you in virtue. Think about something like customer service, right? You want to be a jerk in something like customer service when your product or your service didn't work out the way it was supposed to, you're not going to last very long in business. You will be forced to be an honest person. You will be forced to be a generous person. You will be forced. Think about how you work with a team in business, right? How you give feedback to an employee, or how you as a business owner have to get feedback, honest feedback from people who are in a sense under you, right? And who would be tempted maybe to butter you up a little bit and not give you the whole truth. And you have to create a culture where someone who doesn't have power over you, right? You're the one who could fire them and not the other way around. You need to create a culture where they can be honest and candid to tell you what they think is going on from their vantage point, because they're seeing something, whether it's in customer service or in distribution or whatever, and they need to tell you something that they think you might not want to hear. And you got to create a culture where they can be candid in order for your business to be successful. Like sports, business is going to force certain kind of virtues on you. Not absolutely. Like, you can still be a vicious person and do this poorly, but that's often going to come back and bite you, right? Whereas what I've seen more often in my life with the people I know who are engaged in business is it's a kind of crucible of human formation where you have to make decisions under pressure. And if you do the right thing over the long run, that's going to be better for your business and you're going to grow in virtue as a person. So doing virtues at your school, absolutely. God bless you. Go to town. But learn to practice also, not just about, let's be good to each other here, but also what can we learn? What kind of virtues do we need to do math, to make good art, to be a good scientist, to be a good business person? All of those things require virtues that can help us find their way into the curriculum and lead to really meaningful conversations with students that will be more impactful in a lot of ways than the particular knowledge or skill that they need to pick up that day, right? Hope that was helpful for you. God bless.